In the early 1970s, California was a land of contrasts. The sun-kissed beaches and sprawling forests painted a picture of freedom. Yet beneath this beauty, danger lurked in shadows. Many residents of Santa Cruz, a small coastal town, felt life was safe, trusting neighbors, friendly streets, and open parks. But in January 1974, that sense of security would be shattered. A young woman named Sheila Ryan, 23 years old, vanished from her home. She was full of life, a young woman with dreams, hopes, and a future ahead. She did not know that her disappearance would mark the beginning of one of the most terrifying chapters in California's criminal history. Sheila Ryan was destined to become the first known victim of the man who would later be called the Trailside Killer, David Carpenter. Sheila Ryan was born and raised in Santa Cruz, California. She had a quiet but strong presence. Friends described her as kind, intelligent, and independent. She loved nature, enjoyed long walks in the forest, and had a fascination for the open coastal trails that lined her hometown. Her life seemed ordinary, yet in its simplicity lay her vulnerability. Young women in the 1970s were often considered free to roam. Safety was assumed. Sheila's trust in the world was natural, but tragically misplaced. She lived with her family in a modest home, worked a regular job, and had close friends who knew her as someone grounded, cheerful, and full of hope. She was the kind of person whose loss would leave an indelible mark on everyone around her. January 1974 began like any other year in Santa Cruz. Snowfall was rare, the streets were quiet, and life moved at a steady pace. Sheila Ryan left her home that morning, perhaps heading to work or planning a day out with friends. She never returned. Hours turned into a day, and the worry in her family's heart grew. Calls were made, neighborhoods were checked, and friends were questioned. At first, some thought she had gone on a short trip, or perhaps a plan she had not disclosed. But as time passed, it became frighteningly clear. Sheila Ryan had disappeared under circumstances far from ordinary. After a tense few days, the search led to a grim discovery. Sheila Ryan's body was found in a remote wooded area near Santa Cruz. She had been sexually assaulted and murdered. The crime scene offered few clues. There were no eyewitnesses, no witnesses to the abduction, and no immediate suspects. It was as though Sheila had been taken by a shadow, someone who knew how to strike silently and disappear without leaving a trace. The news shocked the community. Santa Cruz was a close-knit town, and crime was rare. People were horrified and frightened. The very idea that a young woman could be attacked in a seemingly safe environment changed the community's perception of safety forever. Police immediately launched an investigation. Detectives canvassed neighborhoods, interviewed friends and family, and looked for any lead that could point them to Sheila's killer. But in 1974, forensic science had its limits. DNA testing was decades away. Fingerprints were sometimes inconclusive, and communication between law enforcement agencies was slow. Detectives followed every lead they could find. They questioned local men, checked vehicle records, and even looked at individuals with criminal histories. Yet, despite these efforts, the trail ran cold. There was no sign of forced entry, no fingerprints that could be conclusively linked, and no witnesses who saw the crime happen. Sheila Ryan's murder remained a mysterious and chilling unsolved case. While Sheila's case initially seemed isolated, over the next few years, California began seeing a disturbing pattern. Other young women, often hikers or outdoor enthusiasts, began disappearing or were found murdered in Northern California. Similarities began to emerge. Young female victims, attacks occurring in isolated or wooded areas, sexual assault present in many cases, signs of premeditation and planning by the perpetrator. Yet these cases were investigated separately. Counties handled their own investigations independently. No one yet realized that a single man was behind multiple attacks, striking randomly but methodically. David Carpenter, later known as the Trailside Killer, had a history of violent behavior and sexual assault. By the time Sheila Ryan was murdered, he had already exhibited disturbing tendencies. Prior arrests for sexual assault, periods of confinement in mental health institutions, convictions for violent crimes. Despite these red flags, Carpenter managed to live seemingly normal life outside the law's immediate reach. He blended into society, avoided suspicion, and quietly plotted his next attack. What made him particularly dangerous was his knowledge of outdoor trails and secluded areas, the very places young women felt safe. He exploited the trust of the community, targeting those least expecting danger. After Sheila Ryan, Carpenter continued his killing spree through the late 1970s and early 1980s. His victims were discovered along hiking trails in Northern California, sometimes hours or days after their disappearance. The similarities to Sheila's murder were unmistakable. Authorities began noticing patterns. Attacks in isolated areas. Victims sexually assaulted. Bodies left in locations easy for discovery but hard for witnesses to access. This led media and police alike to give him a moniker, the Trailside Killer. Carpenter's reign of terror continued until a crucial break in 1980. He was arrested for an attempted attack that failed. This arrest allowed police to dig deeper into his past. Investigators reopened old cold cases, including Sheila Ryan's, looking for connections. They discovered overlaps in locations where Carpenter had been known to hike, behavioral patterns of the assaults, time frames when he was unaccounted for. For the first time, detectives began to see a clear link between Sheila Ryan's murder and a larger pattern of serial killings. The investigation relied heavily on behavioral profiling and circumstantial evidence. Although DNA testing was not available at the time of Sheila's murder, law enforcement pieced together the following. Carpenter's known presence in Santa Cruz on the day of Sheila's disappearance. His prior history of sexual assault matched the methodology used against Sheila. Witness statements place Carpenter in areas near multiple victim discoveries. The puzzle pieces began to fit together, pointing unmistakably to David Carpenter. With mounting evidence, Carpenter was formally charged for multiple murders, including Sheila Ryan's. The trial was intense. Prosecutors presented a thorough case. Psychological evaluations, detailed victim profiles, correlations between unsolved cases. Carpenter's attempts to defend himself failed under the weight of evidence and expert testimony. Sheila Ryan, long gone, became central to proving his pattern of serial violence. Ultimately, Carpenter was convicted and sentenced to death. The community, which had lived in fear for years, finally felt a sense of closure. Sheila Ryan may have been 23 years old when she died. She may have been the first of many Trailside Killer victims, but her life, story, and memory live on. In the investigations, in the lessons learned, and in the cautionary tale her death created. By remembering Sheila Ryan, we honor not just her life, but all victims whose stories might otherwise fade. And we remind ourselves that even in the darkest cases, truth and justice are possible, no matter how long it takes.